The British Grand Prix is actually bringing us new tires. Yes, they are still Pirelli, even with the rumor of Bridgestone actually trying to come back into sports. But that will only happen later on, maybe in like 2026, if they decide to go down that route. Now, for 2023, going into 2024, these are the new tire sets that we are going to get, and a new compound called C0, which is actually harder than what we typically get as the C1 hard compound. This C0 tire is supposed to be harder than any other tire we have gotten. There are reasons for this. There's also things that have been talked about in the future that I want to bring up with these tires. Not only about the hardness of them, but also something that's being brought up by Formula One that a lot of teams are opposing. I also want to get into why some drivers will benefit from this, some teams will benefit from this, and will it change really the pecking order we have right now? Will the teams get closer? Let's get into it. Firstly, like I said, I wanted to talk about what these tires are going to bring. The tires are harder. What is the reasoning behind this? Why is Pirelli making tires when in a track like Baku, Esteban Ocon was able to go the whole entire race without pitting? Well, pitting once and then just going, actually, yeah, pitted at the very end, almost causing a huge incident and hitting people. Why are they making the tires harder? Well, here is their explanation for it, and it kind of makes sense, it kind of doesn't. They say specifically that they are bringing harder tire compounds to combat if anything is to happen in the future, like in 2024. As these cars bring on more downforce, there are chances of more things like punctures and really the tires just kind of exploding on you because of the cars having more downforce and being more planted into the ground. So harder compounds allowing for the cars to actually go lower and making for faster racing. We've already seen in Miami that the lap time was cut down by 2 whole seconds, which is an insane margin, but then you go to Austria and the margin isn't as big. So depending from track to track, we will see whether the cars are genuinely faster or not. But with harder tires, the cars should be faster, really being able to go through the whole entire lap, including the soft tires, at a way harder pace and not having to be as steady onto them. What this isn't good for, and something else that they've kind of brought up, it isn't good for racing because if the tire is harder, there will be less strategy involved between the teams. Now, that would be a good thing if there was only one tire and everybody was pushing consistently, but if with it being a tire mandate to change, some of our 2-stoppers might be 1-stoppers now. And that would be something that I would absolutely hate. I think the fans of Formula One would absolutely hate if we had to go from, like, let's say Spain or Austria just now that we just had. Those are 2-stop races. Silverstone can usually be a 2-stop race and typically on hardest tire compounds. So we'll see. Will somebody actually take the risk of going from a C1 to a C2 and that's all they do in the race instead of going C2, C2, C1 or C1, C1, C2? Medium, medium, hard, 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 medium. You get the point. Will somebody just do a medium to hard or hard to medium? I really hope that's not the case, and I don't hope that they're not able to just kind of glide to the victory because they're the only ones that actually kind of tried pulling the 1-stop. It'd be cool if it's not Red Bull though. Seeing a different winner would be nice. Not that I'm against Red Bull, not that I'm against Max Verstappen. We love seeing Max Verstappen dominate like this, don't get me wrong, I think he's a monster, but a different win would be nice. I think even Max Verstappen fans would agree. Regardless, another thing that's being talked about is the tire blankets and taking off the tire blankets going into 2024. A lot of teams have already rejected this. I would really like to hear your guys' opinion and say how much I love you guys and thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. We're almost at 5,000, so thank you all so much for the support. But leave a comment down below about really the tire blanket solution. That's what I'd really like to hear from you guys. Do you guys think we should go without tire blankets or should we keep them on? Now, here are the pros and cons of it. Let's say we keep on the tire blankets. Now, tires will be a little bit more warmed up. The undercut is better now. You can actually perform an undercut because you can kind of glide on the tires right away. Even nowadays, it's less of an undercut than it used to be, like in 2021, where you could practically undercut the car completely 3 laps earlier and be like 10 seconds ahead because the tires were just that flicked on. But now it's been reduced in temperature multiple different times, so you can't get that ahead, but the undercut is still pretty strong. But there are also overcuts. Now, if you take off the tire blankets, overcuts will be super overpowered because going onto those tires, they'll be cold, you're gonna be slipping, you won't really know where the braking zones are at. It'll be a big adjustment period, and I guarantee you we go into testing, people will be pit stopping like crazy and seeing where these braking zones are at with cold tires. It'll bring a different type of element to racing, really it will, but if somebody's in the lead, the tires are cold, they're not able to warm up the tires very well, it'll kind of screw them, like really going into the race. Like Mercedes, Aston Martin, even Red Bull kind of struggle with tire warm-up. So, hey, maybe Ferrari will actually now be able to fly past everybody because they're able to shred their tires. Maybe even Haas. It provides a different type of look, definitely, onto the sport. Let me know your thoughts down below. I actually think I'm against going for taking off tire blankets. I don't think they do that much harm. I think if we actually had a better calendar, the way that it was set up by traveling, that would be a lot better for the sport rather than taking off tire blankets. Now I wanted to go into which drivers will kind of benefit from this in teams. Actually, I don't know how many of you guys followed really Formula One Twitter beef and drama in the beginning of the season, but when these new tires were talked about, there was a whole debate going around, some drivers are going to benefit very strongly from this, some are going to be weakened by this. The biggest thing is these new tires coming will add a lot of front end to these cars. Some drivers really love front end, some drivers are kind of in the middle about it. They don't really know how to feel, because with the more durable tire, the car will be more squirrely on the back, but it will make for a really hard braking car, but also being able to flick the car, something a certain Max Verstappen loves. Now he's already leading at the pace that he's leading at, so now giving him a tire benefit too? Bam. Now, the thing is, other drivers really like this too. Charles Leclerc is a big guy on having an oversteery car and also loving a strong front end. It's kind of been known about his career that he's really loved that. Now, his teammate Carlos Sainz has really not liked having a strong front end. He very much loves a strong rear end and loves a understeery car. But a strong front end and an oversteery car is always faster than a car with understeer and a strong rear end. The reasoning being you're able to actually put the car in different positions. With a strong rear end, you'll be more stable and yes, you'll be probably more consistent. But if you learn how to control a car with a stronger front end, you will always be the quicker driver. Michael Schumacher liked driving like that. Max Verstappen likes driving like that. Senna liked driving like that. Drivers that drive very aggressively like it. Lewis is very in the middle. Carlos is very much towards the rear end. So it depends on what type of driver you're getting. Even a guy like Fernando Alonso isn't necessarily the greatest at having a super strong front end. Loves hard braking, but also loves a very stable rear end. If you watch his driving style, even in Canada would be the perfect example. He lost out a couple of tenths on Max Verstappen purely due to driving style because of him liking a rear end comparison to Max Verstappen's very oversteery car. So it does benefit drivers like Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc and hurts drivers like Carlos Sainz in particular. But another thing is it advances certain teams. For Ferrari, this is exactly what they needed. The rear end of the Ferrari is amazing, but the front end is kind of iffy. That's where they have too much tire temperature and they get screwed over really blazing through their tires. That's why in clean air they're actually very good, but in dirty air they're very pathetic. Another car that benefits from this is actually the AMR 23, which I'm very happy to hear that it will benefit it. How much of a benefit will this add though? So you have driver benefits like Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, but you also have team benefits. Now, the Red Bull doesn't necessarily benefit from this, but they also don't lose much off of this. It's the same thing with Mercedes. If we're going off of those top 4 teams, Mercedes and Red Bull have already a very strong front end. They don't necessarily need it to be any stronger. Aston Martin and Ferrari kind of lack in that avenue, so this actually helps them going into the long run with these tires. Being able to kind of step on throttle faster is something that Aston Martin and Ferrari lack, so this should help them. Will it be enough to catch Red Bull? Absolutely not. It's not going to make that big of a difference. It might help with driving style, but it won't actually make the car that much faster. It'll help in certain aspects, but it won't necessarily change the pecking order that we have. Red Bull will still be way ahead, and if it helps Max Verstappen, I don't expect it to be any more less of a lead than he's getting at the moment. Let me know your thoughts down below about the tires. It's actually a very interesting conversation. I thought we should have it. Let's talk about it. Leave a comment, leave a like, please subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.